Well, hello, hello. We actually have Oksana with us, who is one of the actual co-authors in Think Limitlessly. And I have to tell you, Oksana is probably one of my favorite humans in the world for so many reasons. But one of the reasons is that we met really randomly, or maybe not so randomly, in Uganda back in 2014. But the way that she actually looks at life is truly limitlessly. So welcome, Oksana.
Thanks so much, Kathy, for having me. It's so good to see you. And considering how far apart we are, it's just always nice to see you by video, if that's the only way we can do it.
I know even though we don't often catch up, and we were just saying that, it feels like forever. It's like we just pick up from where we left off, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what friends do, right?
Yeah.
When they're no friends.
Absolutely, absolutely. So going to your chapter in the book, you actually call it like mother, like daughter. And without really sharing too much, can you give us a little bit of insight? Because it is such a powerful message that you actually share in this chapter.
No, absolutely. I think I mentioned in the chapter that I'm the youngest of 12, and with that came a lot of fun times, but also a lot of dependency. So I almost had, you know, 11 mothers and fathers, on top of the mother and father that I already had. And so I really had a lot of limited independence, we'll just say. And when I kind of think about my mother's experience and how she was the youngest of three, so she was the youngest child as well, and how she was able to think limitlessly in life and just grow up very independent and very free spirited, and was able to leave her homeland during World War II in Ukraine, and move to Germany to work, and then pull my father, post World War II to the United States with her children for independence, and how she just was fearless. And she really did, in her own way, think limitlessly. And as I just think about my own life and my own journey, being that dependent child, I thirsted and craved for, one, that independence, and then two, that adventurous spirit too. And so, part of my life has been about setting goals, of one of which was being, independent, whether it was, emotionally independent from my family, financially independent, professionally independent from them, and, living an independent lifestyle, as well as traveling around the world. I mean, those were two, of my huge tenets, and they were just very much like my mother. And I really wanted this chapter of the book to celebrate not only my journey of thinking limitlessly, but where it came from, which was really inspired by her and her story.
One of the things when I actually read your chapter, you actually highlight the challenges. And, sometimes people actually might look at you and who you are today and think, oh my gosh, you've got it all. You've just been so lucky. Mm-hmm. That's not quite the reality, is it? So you talk about an 8-year-old girl being an 8-year-old girl and having those visions, of travel, even to Australia. Mm-hmm. But you actually also then share some insight about how in your travels, particularly, when you went through to Germany and actually were afforded the opportunity to actually have a look at some areas that most people don't get access to, that really actually, I guess, brought perspective to the challenges, that your parents faced. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, my parents' story is really interesting. I mean, I'm not going to diminish my own story. I think my own journey has been, very interesting and powerful as well. But my parents were able to overcome, when they got to Nazi Germany separately, having been put into internment kind of slave worker camps, throughout, different places of Germany, and, having their papers taken away, being forced to work out in the fields day and night, being fed very little, being put back into, these internment camps with literally fences around the corridors and German shepherds and guards patrolling, and how they could have persevered through all of that is just incredible, which
Mm.
really shows what kind of people they were in terms of their heart and their soul, and how they were really searching for something different, one, and then they were trying to escape from communism and from the Soviets, and how that really drove them to persevere through a prison experience like that, and then after the war in refugee camps, and find a way to the United States. And it just goes to show you, if they could keep a dream alive, of being
Mhm.
able to one day make it to a country like the United States where they can be free, then we can all keep our dreams alive, regardless of those obstacles. And I'll tell you, Cathy, I might not be, I mean, I'm not going to diminish myself, but I'm not a super genius. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I've always held to my dreams, even if I've had to, maybe change them or tweak them over time, or I've had obstacles and they haven't, my path hasn't exactly gone in that straight and narrow that I wanted it to when I, set up my North Star. I never let those obstacles get the best of me. One, because, I tried to stay true to myself, right? And that dream of thinking limitlessly. And then secondly, I also drew upon the people around me, whether they were family and friends who really loved me, to get their support, including, my mother and my father, my brothers and sisters, friends like you. And, having those things really help you to stay true to yourself. And, I don't care if you're 8 years old and you have a dream. I don't care if you're 50 years old and you think that that dream's impossible to come true because it's been 40 plus years. I say just keep going after it and never give up. And when you asked me, does thinking limitlessly speak to you, I really had to kind of take a step back and think about it. And I'm not the most famous person in the world, but I have been able to come from, humble beginnings and make something of myself that makes me truly happy. And to me, that's what thinking limitlessly is about, and dreaming and attaining your dreams. And that's all we can ever ask of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You then lead into, and I think you talked about it, just now, but you lead into following that own journey in your own footsteps. The power of that is incredible. So do you want to just share a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think what's, interesting about, life and your dreams is hopefully we all have more than one. And as, you're able to attain a dream, you can then look to another dream. So in my chapter, I talk about a few dreams that I had, and how they maybe changed a little bit over time, and how new dreams popped up. So a couple of them in terms of kind of different footsteps that I took was, one, even, back to when I was 8 years old in second grade, writing these stories. I always thought to myself that I would love to be a writer, even though I didn't necessarily think it was the most practical profession to have in life. But, here I am 50 years old, and it's the second anthology that I've written with you
Yeah.
and other co-authors. And I know you and I have been talking about me, potentially writing something on my own. And it's very exciting to me to do. And I don't care if you're 8, if you're 50, or if you're 80, if that's something you want to do, that's great. So I
Yeah.
think that's, an example of, a second, or tertiary dream that I had that I'm really trying to make true. And then I think the last one was, just becoming a mother. It was something that,
Yeah.
I really wanted to do. I wasn't sure if it would ever happen for me. And, again, it was late in life at 48, but I was able to give birth to my daughter, Sophia, and she's really everything to me. And I would never change a thing. And what's amazing about it is yes, she's changed my life so much, right? And everyone talks about that, but she's also brought so much love and happiness
Yeah.
into my family, as well as my extended family that includes my friends. I mean, and you, yes, you'll be meeting her in a month. Yeah. And it's just again, never give up on your dreams, even if they don't happen in the magical order that society tells you they should happen in.
Mhm.
You should never give up on them and always look for a way to make them happen, even if they weren't in the way that you necessarily scribed out to yourself, as an 8-year-old.
I think one of the things as I've gotten to know you more and more is your commitment and your passion for that future generation. And you start to talk about that in your chapter as well, about following your footsteps. So you're talking to the future generation. What's something that you can share out of, your chapter that that future generation can hear you now actually say to them?
What I would say to them is, I know it feels hard and I know it feels very overwhelming. I think some of the thing that really helped me in following my dreams and being able to make them come true over time was to really dissect them, create a path and dissect them, and create more manageable milestones, almost like a project manager would, to help
Really?
make them less overwhelming to happen. And also have a little bit of that, flexibility in mind, knowing that, you may not have that straight and narrow path, and anything that isn't hard really isn't worth going after necessarily, and isn't a dream that once you achieve it, you'll really feel a lot of self-worth over it. Nothing, anything hard really makes it worthwhile. And then what I would also say to the next generation, I know I wrote about it in my chapter, is if you think you have it hard, think about the country of Ukraine where my mother came from. Those 40 million people really believe that they should be a part of the European Union and they should be a part of NATO. And look at, the adversity that they're taking on to be able to hold tight to their dream. And if they can live without electricity, if they can live with, bombs every night, if they can live with, their children being kidnapped and being occupied every single day, then I think it makes our dreams seem not so hard.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much perspective in what you've just shared. And I think sometimes we actually overlook that, in moments of just looking at self, we forget the reality of what really is happening out in the world.
Yeah, and really what the true meaning of hard is
Yes,
sometimes. And I
absolutely.
think that brings perspective to anyone who really believes that their dream is so unattainable or it's so hard. It's, others may have it harder than you do. And maybe you can get some inspiration from that to
Yeah.
keep going.
Now you share 5 tips with us.
Mhm.
One of them, is actually about finding advocates and to encourage you. Can you actually share a little bit of information about that specific tip? Because sometimes we're really quite frightened to ask for help, aren't we?
Yes, yes. And in fact, that's not a secret power I have either in terms of asking for help. I really tend to try to do things as much as I can on my own until I really realize how overwhelmed I am. And then I have a tendency to, finally ask for help and realize that there are many hands out there to help us. We just have to ask for it. And I think again, it's a hard thing for me. I think I'm getting better at it and I'm trying to. But I think the most important thing is really kind of rifling through who are your true friends and who are your true advocates versus contrarians, because I believe that the first thing you have to do is really be willing to open yourself up, and share your dream. And you need to be able to do that with enough people to really know who are the people who will stay your friend, will be your advocate. And if you don't take the first step of sharing with them what you want, then you'll be able to know if they're a distractor or if there's someone who will be an advocate to you. So I think, one, knowing your dream, but not keeping it so tight vested that no one knows about it, because I think you'd be very surprised to see how many people would be willing to help you.
Yeah.
And again, the people that don't, that distract you, are probably not good friends and not worth staying in contact anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we all find challenging, is to actually share our dreams. Because gosh, if we don't actually do it, then what, right? But then to actually ask for help, that vulnerability piece is actually, I think, within all of us. So, we all say is that if you want somebody to do something, then you've got to actually show them. And we can only show them by doing it ourselves, right?
Yes. Yeah, well, and asking, right? I mean, it is having to be vulnerable to ask, and to share. And luckily I have friends like you. So, when you approached me about the first anthology, I was scared and nervous about it. But then I thought about that 8-year-old dream, and I shared it with you, and I said yes.
And look at where you are today. And, every time I actually read your chapter and what you write, it's like, oh my gosh, like, you bring me joy and you bring me tears. And I think there's so much depth, to who you are. And I think that's the beauty of storytelling. That's the beauty of actually sharing your story, enabling others to actually go, oh my gosh, I can relate to that. And you had that experience, didn't you, with the earlier book? Somebody picked up, going against the grain, and they went, oh my gosh, I'm reading my own story, but they were reading yours. So
Yeah. And in fact, if I could add on and share a little bit more, because I don't think that you and I followed up on this afterwards, was that I was able to give a few talks at my own company at Accenture about the going against the grain chapter. And because of the current events of what was happening in Ukraine, I brought some of that to bear. And I was amazed at how many I wouldn't call them immigrants, first generation. So their parents were immigrants to the United States, and how many of them came up to me afterwards and said how much my story resonated for them. It was almost like an American, second generation story. And it didn't matter if they came from, their parents came from China, their parents came from the UK, their parents came from South America, that there was something there that really resonated with them, that sort of, being trapped in two different cultures, and having to find a way to figure out who you were and how you were going to, be able to make it work, in the society that you were living in, with knowing that you'd always have one foot in each world. I think even for yourself, being Greek Australian, it resonated with you too.
Oh, absolutely. As I read that chapter, it was like, I'd never really thought about it, but here I am. That's my reality. Even the differences between me and my brother, because I couldn't understand the things that he was experiencing. He was raised or born in Greece, and came at 6. So absolutely, when we actually allow ourselves to be vulnerable through story, in sharing our actual experiences, we allow others to come on that journey with us.
And I do have the book.
Yeah. I have to actually can I take a screenshot? I'll have to actually pause this. Let me actually do this.
Okay.
My goodness, we should have done this at the beginning.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had it with me to do this, but then we were having such an engaging conversation, I forgot.
Okay. So, Oksana,
Yes.
thank you so much for actually sharing your story. And if there's anything else that you wanted to actually leave our readers or listeners with, what would that be?
So I guess it is probably something that I've already said, which is just never give up on your dreams, never give up on thinking limitlessly, because it's important to remember that it's a key part of whom you are, and a part of your soul. And it doesn't matter if you never attain it until late in life. It's something, I think that helps to keep, I know it sounds crazy, but I think it helps to keep people grounded by thinking limitlessly and having a North Star, because it helps them think about whom they are, whom they want to be, what they want to do. And it's very important for everyone. And I think people lose themselves when they stop dreaming and they stop thinking limitlessly.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Oksana Kukurudza. It is my absolute pleasure and joy to actually have this chat with you and for you to actually share in Think Limitlessly. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Cathy.